Today on VA Wednesday, we're going to be talking about no money down. So a client actually suggested I did this video because there's a myth and there's a misconception, and a lot of people fall for this. So there's lots of advertisements for VA loans, right? Zero down for heroes, no money down. And that's accurate for the mortgage. VA does not require a down payment on the mortgage. Okay, now if you've used it before and you have other stuff going on in other VA loans, yes, you may have to pay a down payment. But if this is your first use, VA does not require a down payment. That's where the zero down, the no money, all those catchy headlines come from. But it's led to a misconception. And the misconception is a lot of people believe if they do a VA loan that it's no money down no matter what. And that's just because they don't understand the process. I mean, why would anyone understand the mortgage process and buying a house unless they were doing it or worked in that industry? So today I want to talk to you about closing costs. Yes, closing costs. So whenever you're buying a house, there's going to be closing costs, money that it costs to close the home. So with VA, we don't charge a lender fee. We don't charge origination. However, there's many lenders that do. There's a couple big lenders that charge 1% origination upfront. At closing is what I should say, but they charge 1% origination. So what does that mean? What's 1% origination? Well, if you're buying a $400,000 house, that lender's charging you $4,000 to do the loan. Yeah. And then you're like, okay, well, I can come up with the $4,000. What else do I need to pay for? Title and escrow, property taxes, homeowners insurance, an appraisal, homeowners inspection, pest, maybe you pay for it, maybe the seller pays for it, depends on the state you're in. All these different costs are occurring when you're buying a house, okay? So you want to be really careful that you recognize that, hey, look, on the mortgage it's zero down, but unless you're negotiating with the seller to pay all the closing costs, you're going to be bringing money to the table, okay? You're going to be bringing money to the table. So what I do with first-time home buyers is I always want an application. Like usually I start with a conversation. If you guys want to work with myself or my team, please start by scheduling a phone call. We get so many emails that it's hit a point where like I feel terrible. I wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning because I know I haven't responded to people from a week ago who are asking scenario questions. I really need you guys to get on the calendar because then we can do it over the phone. It takes 10 minutes versus reading the email, going back and forth 50 times. Talking is so much more efficient than email. So I always like by a quick conversation to figure out where someone is. Like, should we do an app or do they have some stuff to do first? And if it looks like they're in a position to do an application, I always say, look, fill out my online app. We'll go through it. We're going to ask for documents. We're really going to go through it aggressively. But what we're also going to do is by having the application, I'm able to pull in all the local estimates for fees in the areas that you guys are looking in. And it varies state by state. It varies county by county. In some places, you pay the transfer taxes. In some places, the seller does. There's a lot to it. And then I go through the loan summary and I say, hey, look, this is what closing costs look like. Now you may be like, shoot, I don't have that much money. That's normal, okay? I find that the bulk of our clients don't have a ton of money to pay towards closing costs. Most of America doesn't have that much money saved. Like that's what the statistics are. It's expensive living day to day. So it's tough for people to save money when their rent is more or the same as a mortgage payment. Okay, but what you need to know is you need to know what you're asking for when you write the offer. Because if you write an offer on a house and you're not asking the seller to pay closing costs and you don't have the money to pay the closing costs, how's that going to work, right? And in some cases, the lender can increase your rate and give you a lender credit, but in some cases they can't. If it's a $100,000, $200,000 loan, there's a limit to how much we could increase your rate. I mean, you could go from 2.75 to 5% trying to get money. Don't do that. Know what you need up front so that when you're negotiating for a house, you ask for it. So I'll tell people like, okay, here's how much money you need. This is how much money you have in your bank account. I never think anyone should wipe out their savings and all their money. That is a terrible idea. When you move into a house, there's going to be stuff that needs to be fixed. Maybe you need a new washing machine. Maybe you need a new dryer. So it's really important to make sure that you get into a financial position you can afford. So might you lose your dream home because you don't have money for closing costs? Yeah, you might, totally. Because the seller may say, guess what? I'm not going to give them all that money. right? Because at closing, we're collecting a year of homeowners insurance. You may not be able to pay for that. The seller may not want to pay for it either. So you really need to know up front, okay, so I'm buying a $400,000 house, closing costs with taxes and insurance and all this stuff is looking like it's going to be $9,000. I need to ask the seller to pay 2.5% towards closing costs. And you need to make sure your realtor knows this. Okay, there's certain areas of the country where there's zero chance of you getting closing costs. So in that case, you're going to need to sit down and save and save and save, even though you've got that zero down loan, because you're going to need to pay for your closing. But what I see more often than not is sellers understand this, and you just need to get the right seller so that you can work the situation so that you can go in truly with zero down. Now, one important thing to note: whenever you're buying a house, you're going to have to deposit what's known as earnest money. And earnest money is like a show of good faith. So for instance, what I see a lot of is $1,000 deposits. So what that means is that in your contract, even if you get the seller paying your closing costs, they're often going to want to see that you have some money at title and escrow. And that's because by accepting your contract, they're taking the house off the market so that you can close on it. That does affect them. So if everything goes to heck, they're going to want some sort of financial benefit. And that's what that $1,000 could act as. Do I see sellers get that money a lot? No, I really don't. And that money could go towards your closing costs. Now, if you end up in the perfect situation where you're doing zero down and the seller's paying for everything, you can get that earnest money deposit back. You can never get more than that. So that's important to know, because sometimes people are like, oh, well, if I get a seller credit for 30 grand, then I can get $20,000 back, right? No, that's incentive to buy. You can't get money back more than you put in at the table. So I hope this has been helpful. The key thing is that make sure the lender you're talking to is talking to you about closing costs, because there's some lenders that don't even have the conversation with you. They just tell the realtor he needs money towards closing costs, but you don't understand why. Your contracts are not being accepted. So you're having to write more, which is normal. In this market, be prepared to write 30 offers. It's hot. It's the market. Doesn't matter how much you're putting down, who you are, what your credit score is. Be prepared to write a lot of offers. You want to have this conversation because you want to be able to actively understand, like, okay, I'm asking the seller for $10,000, so maybe I shouldn't also ask them to drop their price $20,000. So keep that stuff in mind. Make sure the lines of communication are open with both your lender and your realtor. I am licensed in 44 states. If you're interested in chatting with me or my team, please fill out the calendar. Just pick a time from my calendar. I do not discriminate. You pick a time. I or someone on my team will call you, and we will try to see if we can help you out, get you a great rate, and walk through those closing costs so that you're not ambushed by them. Thank you for watching, and I hope you guys are having a good week.